A knock in the cold night. Jalen lived alone, far away from the busy cities and crowded spaceports. His small home sat in the middle of a forgotten wasteland where the nights were cold and the winds were cruel. He didn't have neighbors. He didn't have visitors, and he liked it that way. Life had already shown him too much pain. So he stayed alone, quiet, hidden. That night, the wind outside howled like a hungry beast. Yalin sat by the heater, sharpening his old knife, lost in thought. Then, suddenly, there was a knock at the door, not loud, just soft, like someone afraid to be heard. He stood still, unsure if it was real or just the wind playing games. Another knock came, this time with a faint voice. "Please." Yalin slowly moved to the door. He didn't open it right away. He placed his hand on the metal frame, ready for trouble. But what he saw when he finally opened the door wasn't danger. It was something far more surprising. A woman stood there, shaking in the cold. Her skin was pale blue and her eyes glowed faintly like stars. She wasn't human. And in her arms, she held a small alien child wrapped in thin cloth. Both looked weak, tired, and frozen. Her voice trembled as she spoke again. "Please. I don't want your food. I don't want your money. I only ask for one thing," she said, holding the child tighter. Then her eyes met his, full of shame and fear. "If I warm your bed, will you let us stay?" Yalin said nothing. His face stayed blank, but inside, his mind was racing. He didn't like surprises. He didn't like visitors. And yet, something about the way she stood there, not begging for pity, but offering herself for safety, hit him hard. He stepped aside. She entered quietly, moving like someone who expected to be thrown out any moment. The child didn't look up. He just clung to her, silent and still. Yalin closed the door and turned up the heater. He handed her a blanket without speaking. They sat in silence for a while. She didn't touch him. She didn't try to climb into his bed. Instead, she used the blanket to wrap the child and kept her distance. Yalin watched her from the corner of his eye. She looked exhausted, but her hands moved gently as she rubbed warmth into the child's tiny fingers. She wasn't a threat. She was a mother. "What's your name?" Yalin asked finally. She looked surprised that he spoke. "Inari," she replied. "And this is Ryan. He hasn't spoken in weeks." Yalin didn't ask why. He had a feeling he didn't want to know the full story. "Not yet. You can sleep over there," he said, pointing to a corner with old cushions and blankets. She nodded quickly. "Thank you." The rest of the night passed quietly. Inari and the child slept without moving, as if afraid that any noise would wake up danger. Yalin didn't sleep. He watched the door, watched the window. Something about this was not normal. A woman like her wouldn't end up here by accident. Someone was chasing her. In the early hours of the morning, while the fire was burning low, Yalin heard a strange noise outside. He stood and walked quietly to the window. In the sky, far in the distance, he saw blinking red lights. Not stars. Not natural. Drones. He cursed under his breath. Someone had followed her. He turned to look at Inari. She was still asleep, curled around the child. She didn't look like a spy or a soldier. She looked like someone running from something too big to fight. And now she had brought it to his door. But something inside him stirred. It had been a long time since he cared about anything, since he let anyone in, and yet here she was. Not asking for charity, not crying for help, just making a quiet offer to survive. "If I warm your bed, will you let us stay?" She had asked. She didn't know that she had already changed everything. Not with her body, but with her courage. Yalin knew he had two choices: send her away before it was too late, or protect her and face whatever was coming. He sat down beside the heater again, staring into the flames. Something told him This was only the beginning. Asterisk secrets in the firelight. Jalen wasn't used to sharing his space with anyone, especially not with someone from another world. But the presence of Inari and her child Ryan brought a strange silence to the room, one that wasn't empty. It was full of tension, unspoken stories, and something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. She hadn't touched him. She hadn't asked for more. She just stayed quiet and careful, like someone used to being punished for speaking. In the soft crackling of the heater, Inari sat cross-legged with her child in her arms. Ryan still hadn't spoken. His big eyes stared at nothing. Yalin noticed small scars along his arms, and something about them didn't look like accidents. He didn't ask. Not yet. He wanted to, but the silence between them wasn't ready to break. Later, Inari finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost like she was afraid someone else might hear. "I was born in a breeding center," she said. "My kind weren't meant to have names, only numbers. I took the name Inari when I escaped. It means free wind in my mother's tongue." Yalin didn't interrupt. He just listened. The firelight danced in her silver blue eyes as she spoke. "We were made for comfort," she continued, "for trade. Some of us were trained to cook, some to clean, others to entertain. I was one of the warm ones. I was trained to be given as gifts. Not wives, not mates, just gifts. The day I gave birth to Ryan, they said he was defective. Said his blood was mixed. I ran before they could take him away." Yalin looked at the child again. Ryan had the glow of his mother's skin, but a certain sharpness in his face, something different. Human, maybe? That thought made Jalen's heart skip a beat. "I've kept moving ever since," Inari said. "No home, no sleep. Just hiding. Every planet we stepped on, someone tried to take me back. Last time, I broke a man's arm. Ryan saw it. He hasn't spoken since." The room felt heavy with truth. Yalin took a long breath. He had seen a lot in his life. Wars, betrayals, broken people. But something about her story hit deeper than all of that. She wasn't just a runaway. She was someone who had been used all her life and still found the strength to protect her child. "You're not safe here," Yalin said. "I know," Inari replied, "but I was out of choices." He believed her. And he also knew what those blinking lights from last night meant. Trackers didn't stop just because someone crossed a border, especially not if the one they were after held value. And Yalin now understood something he didn't before. Inari wasn't running from a crime. She was running from ownership. Later that evening, when the child was finally asleep, Inari sat closer to the fire. She didn't speak again, but her eyes kept watching Yalin like she was waiting for him to break. Instead, Yalin did something he hadn't done in years. He handed her a bowl of stew he'd made himself. She held it like it was gold. "You don't owe me anything," he said, quietly. She didn't reply, but a small tear fell down her cheek. Not because of sadness, but because someone had said that to her for the first time. Outside, the wind was still howling. But inside, the silence had changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a fragile peace. For the first time, Inari let her shoulders relax, but neither of them knew that 2 bounty ships had already landed 3 miles away. And one of the hunters had Jalen's name on their list, too. Back near the door, Rand stirred in his sleep and whispered a single word: "Safe." It was the first time he had spoken in weeks. Yalin didn't smile. But deep inside, something moved. Maybe he wasn't just protecting them. Maybe they were healing him too. Asterisk a soft hand. A hard truth. Ryan was not like other children Yalin had met. He didn't cry. He didn't laugh. He didn't ask for anything. He simply watched the world with quiet eyes that had already seen too much. Yalin had once believed silence was strength, but in this child, the silence felt more like something broken. And yet, it was the way Inari touched him so gently. like she feared she might hurt him, that told Yalin everything. One morning, just as the sky turned gray outside, Yalin noticed Ryan's small hands shaking. Inari tried to hide it, but Yalin caught a glimpse of the strange red marks running across the boy's skin. Circular scars, too perfect to be natural. Not burns from an accident. These were from a collar. From control. From someone treating a child like a creature to be owned. Who did this? Yalin asked, voice low. Inari didn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears and her hands trembled as she held Ryan tighter. I did what I had to do, she whispered. They were going to take him from me. They said he was a mistake, that no child born of mixed blood should exist. I begged them, and when they didn't stop, I took him. I ran. I stole one of their ships. I didn't care where we landed. I just had to keep him breathing. Yalin didn't speak. Instead, he walked over to the small drawer near his bed and opened it. Inside was a scanner he hadn't used in years, one used by bounty hunters to check for implanted tags. He pointed it gently at Ryan's arm. The scanner beeped red. There was a tracker buried under the boy's skin. Inari gasped, but she didn't panic. She simply nodded. I knew it, she said. They always prepare for runaways. Yalin stared at the screen. The code was old, but not inactive. That meant someone was close. He had a decision to make. Removing the tag was possible, but risky. He could damage the child. But leaving it meant leading hunters right to their door. I can take it out, Yalin said, but it will hurt him. Inari looked down at Ryan, who now rested his head against her chest. He's already hurting, she said. But if this is the only way, do it. Yalin nodded and began preparing. As he worked, his hands moved faster than he expected. He had once removed tags from other runaways, but this time felt different. This wasn't a job. This was personal. When the small piece of metal came free from under Ryan's skin, the boy didn't scream. He just looked up at Yalin with wide eyes and reached out his hand. Yalin took it without thinking. Inari looked at them both, tears in her eyes again. But not from fear. This time, it was something close to hope. Later, after Ryan had fallen asleep, Yalin asked Inari something he had been holding back. Why come here? This place is empty. No one comes this far out. Inari hesitated, then stood, and walked to the corner of the room. She reached into her small pack and pulled out something wrapped in thick cloth. When she opened it, Yalin's eyes widened. Inside was a silver data drive, one with a glowing blue edge. Yalin had seen one just like it before, long ago, in a war zone. What's on that? He asked. Inari looked at him, her voice calm. Proof. Files, images, names, coordinates of every breeding center my people are still trapped in. The buyers, the sellers, the owners, all of them. Yalin stared at the drive. He realized then she wasn't just a victim. She was dangerous. She was a witness. A living secret someone powerful wanted erased. You said you stole a ship, he whispered. You didn't just run. You planned this. She didn't deny it. I had to be more than a mother, she said. I had to be the reason it all ends. For the first time, Yalin understood the weight of what he had let inside his home. He hadn't just let in a mother and child, he had let in a revolution. Asterisk. The choice of a killer Yalin's hands were once famous in certain circles, not for healing, but for ending lives. He was a ghost in the bounty world, a man who hunted the galaxy's most wanted without leaving a trail. His past was full of silence, shadows, and blood. He never asked questions. He only took the job, collected the credits, and disappeared. That's how he survived. That's how he stayed free. Until now. Now, the same man who had once dragged fugitives by their hair to cold prison cells was hiding one in his own home. And not just any fugitive Inari, the alien mother carrying proof that could destroy entire slave networks. She hadn't told him everything, but she didn't have to. He'd seen enough. The scars on her son, the tracker in his skin, the stolen data drive still glowing faintly. It was all real. Then the message came, a coded signal burned into an old channel Yalin hadn't checked in years. No words, just a symbol, a black eye with a red line through it. Someone from his old life knew where he was. Worse, they knew what he was hiding. Yalin stared at the screen for a long time. He knew what this meant. They weren't coming to ask questions. They were coming to clean up, quietly, brutally. And if he didn't act first, Inari and Ryan wouldn't. See another sunrise. Inari stood behind him, her eyes calm but tired. You could still turn us in, she said softly. They'd pay you. A lot. He didn't answer. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because her words burned. She was right. He could trade them for safety, money, freedom. All the things he had once lived for. But none of that mattered anymore. Not after what he had seen. Not after what she had risked. I don't want their money, Yalin said. I want their system to rot. Inari stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. That night, Yalin took apart the floor beneath his bed and pulled out a locked black case he hadn't opened in years. Inside were weapons, not just guns, but things made for silence, speed, and precision, tools of his old trade. He checked them one by one, clean, sharp, ready. But something had changed. He wasn't a hunter anymore. He was a shield. Inari watched quietly as he loaded each weapon. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She only placed her hand on his arm. Thank you, she said. Ian looked at her, then down at Ryan, asleep on the old mattress. The child now breathed softly, no longer clinging to his mother as tightly. That alone told Yalin he was doing something right. As the night grew darker, Yalin placed motion sensors around the outer edges of the shelter. He set traps in the snow. He activated old tech that had been buried for years. The cold wind didn't bother him. He was used to the dark. It had been his home for a long time, but this time, he wasn't hiding in it. He was preparing for war. 2 hours before dawn, the first alarm went off, a soft chime, barely heard inside. But Yalin heard it. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. In the distance, a shadow moved, then another. They weren't walking. They were gliding trackers in stealth suits. He had only seconds. Yalin aimed. The first shot dropped one instantly. The second ducked and disappeared behind a rock. Yalin moved quickly, silent as death. He could feel the old rhythm returning to his blood, but this wasn't like before. He wasn't hunting for a bounty. He was fighting for something pure. Battle was fast and brutal. 3 of them came. None of them left out by the time Yalin returned to the shelter. The snow around him was painted with streaks of black blood. Inari was waiting, holding a small weapon of her own. But when she saw him, something in her eyes shifted. Not fear, not relief. Respect. Ian placed the rifle down and sat near the heater. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them had changed again. She came closer, slowly, and sat beside him. You're not who I thought you were, she said quietly. Ian looked at her. Neither are you. Outside, the wind howled again. But inside, something stronger had taken root. Trust. Blood in the snow that came before sunrise, just as the wind began to shift. Yalin had seen the signs. Birds vanishing. Silence stretching too long. Tracks in. The snow that hadn't been there the night before. These weren't scouts. They were killers. And they were close. Inari woke first. Not from noise, but from instinct. She moved Ryan behind the heater, wrapped him in silence, and met Jalen's eyes across the room. No words were spoken. They both understood. This wasn't a warning. This was the storm. The first blast hit the edge of the shelter, an explosive dart designed to shake, not shatter. A tactic used to frighten prey into fleeing. But Jalen didn't run. He was already moving, rifle in hand, body low, breath calm. He'd faced worse, but never with something to lose. The attackers were faster this time. Trained, armored, not just bounty. Hunters, these were retrieval units sent to bring her back alive, even if it meant leaving everyone else dead. They wore helmets with heat-seeking vision. They carried weapons that didn't miss. And they didn't talk .jale and met them in the snow. His first shot hit center mass. But the soldier kept coming. Armor, thick. Too thick for normal rounds. Jalen dove sideways, rolled behind a frozen log, and drew his pulse blade. One came too close. Too eager. Jalen slid under his guard and sliced through the leg joint. The man screamed and dropped. Jalen ended it quickly. Another burst came from the side, burning through a tree trunk. Jalen ducked, heart pounding, mind sharp. This wasn't just a fight. This was a message. They weren't trying to capture him. Only her dot inside the shelter, Inari clutched her son tightly. She wanted to fight. Her blood was hot. Her hands itched. But she had promised herself she wouldn't turn into what they made her. Not again. Not in front of her child. But promises made in peace die in war. When the third attacker broke through the door, she moved like lightning. No weapon, just instinct. She threw herself at the soldier, grabbed the edge of his helmet, and twisted. The snap echoed louder than the blast. Ryan cried out. Inari froze. Jalen burst in seconds later. Covered in snow and blood, eyes wild. He saw the soldier on the floor. Saw Ryan shaking in the corner. And he saw Inari standing over the body, her hands still trembling. I didn't mean for him to see, she whispered. Jalen didn't judge her. He had done worse. But the look in Ryan's eyes, fear, confusion, sadness cut deeper than any. Wound, is it over? Inari asked, voice broken. Jalen checked the perimeter. Only silence. The snow was stained red, the ground littered with armor and metal. For now, yes, it was over. But not truly. Not for long. Jalen had taken down 4 trained men. But they would send more. And this time, they'd bring machines. He returned to the shelter, shoulders heavy, steps slow. He sat down, bleeding from a long cut along his ribs. Inari reached for the medkit, but he waved her off. I've had worse. Still, she cleaned the wound, careful, quiet. Her hands were gentle again. Ryan crept close and sat beside Jalen, eyes wide. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched the scar on Jalen's arm. You fight like my mother, he said. They both froze. It was the first full sentence Ryan had spoken. Inari blinked fast, as if afraid to cry in front of them. Jalen simply placed his hand on the child's head and nodded. I learned from the best, he said. That night they didn't speak much. The fire burned low. The snow outside covered the bodies like the land itself wanted to forget. But none of them forgot. Inari didn't sleep. She watched Ryan dream, her fingers brushing his hair. Jalen sat beside the door, rifle across his lap, eyes on the dark horizon. They both knew this wasn't the end. It was only the first wave, but something had shifted in their hearts. The bond was no longer about survival. It was about choice, about family, and about the war they were now part of, whether they wanted it or not. Asterisk the woman they feared, the wind had changed. It no longer whispered through the frozen land, it screamed. Not with sound, but with tension. Jalen felt it in his bones, a pressure rising in the air. Something was coming. not trackers. Not hunters, something worse. The kind of force sent. Only when the quiet methods fail. Inari felt it too. Her hands moved differently now, no longer shaky or unsure. She no longer asked for safety. She was preparing for something. Something she had been running from, but could no longer escape. The woman they feared, the snow had barely covered the blood outside when Yalin realized something. This fight wasn't about a runaway slave anymore. It was bigger. The men who came last night were elite, the kind used for one thing only, to erase dangerous truths. And Inari wasn't just dangerous. She was feared, not for what she had done, but for what she knew. And for what she had become. He had seen it in her eyes when she killed that soldier. The calm precision, the speed, that wasn't luck. That was training. But not the kind they give to housemaids or entertainment girls. No, this was something else. The morning after the attack, Yalin found her outside, standing barefoot in the snow. Her skin didn't shiver. Her eyes didn't blink. She stood still, staring at the sky, as if waiting. "They'll send machines next," she said, without turning. "How do you know?" "Because I used to train them." Yalin froze. She finally turned toward him, and this time he didn't see the mother. He saw what the slavers must have seen: a weapon. Beautiful, intelligent, programmed. But she had broken free. Not because of some glitch or rebellion. Because of love. "I was part of their control system," she said. "I could access codes. Security gates, prisoner logs. I wasn't supposed to think for myself. But when I was assigned to oversee the nursery where they kept newborns, something broke inside me. I held a baby once. It reached for me, smiled. I wasn't programmed to feel anything, but that day, I did." Yalin listened without interrupting. She had been carrying this story in silence, and now it poured out like a storm. They tried to reset me. Said I was contaminated, useless. Then I found out I was pregnant with Ryan. I knew they'd take him, sell him, cut him open to study how it happened. I ran, killed 3 guards, took the drive, stole a ship, crashed here. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't asking for pity. Jalen took a long breath. "And now they want their secret back." Inari nodded. "They don't care about me. They care about what I carry." Yalin looked toward the horizon. "Then we fight." Inari smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was fierce. Later that day, she did something Yalin didn't expect. She stood in the center of the shelter and closed her eyes. Her skin began to shimmer, then harden. Her soft features shifted, sharp lines forming across her body. Armor grew from her back like steel wings. Her fingers became longer, stronger. Her eyes burned bright white. Rian stared in awe. Yalin didn't move. "This is what they made me," she said. "But I choose who I become now." She walked toward Yalin and stopped just inches from him. "Will you still let us stay?" she whispered. "Now that you know what I really am?" Yalin didn't blink. He stepped closer. "I didn't let you stay," he said. "I chose to stand beside you." Her form softened again. The armor faded. She returned to the woman he had first seen in the cold, but now he knew the truth beneath. That skin, she wasn't fragile. She was fire wrapped in sorrow. That night, they planned. Jalen mapped old rebel routes he once used during his darkest years. Inari decoded the slave traffic system she remembered from inside. And Ryan, now quietly watching everything, began to understand. His mother wasn't just running anymore. She was rising. By dawn, the next step was clear. They couldn't stay here. Not with machines coming. Not with every tracker in the system after them. But they wouldn't run blindly either. They would strike first. Asterisk, a new dawn. A new name. The world didn't change with fire or thunder. It changed with a decision. Quiet, final, sharp like a blade. And Yalin had made his. He was no longer a man hiding from his past. He was now part of a future being built in the shadows by an alien woman once called property, and a child who should never have survived. They didn't run from the next wave of hunters. They left before the machines arrived, vanishing into the snow with only a few supplies, a charged data drive, and a shared purpose. What began as survival had turned into something. Deeper resistance, revenge, revolution. They moved like smoke through forgotten colonies. In the outer zones, where laws bent and shadows ruled, Inari became more than a myth. She became a spark. The silent weapon. The escaped mother who had proof of crime so dark even black market traders flinched when they heard her name. JLE watched her rise, not with power, but with presence. She didn't beg for help. She revealed the truth. One camp at a time. One slaver exposed after the next. Her drive held files on over 2,000 breeding facilities, 10,000 registered buyers, and hundreds of corrupt government links. She knew how the system worked. She had once been part of it, and now she was tearing it apart. Ryan changed too. No longer silent, no longer afraid. He asked questions now. He laughed. He learned to read the languages of 3 systems. He followed. Yalin, imitating how he held a blaster, how he tracked movement in the trees. The boy who once hid in blankets now ran between the trees like he was born for war. Yalin felt something grow inside him, something he never thought he deserved. He wasn't just a protector anymore. He was a father. One night, on a broken moon near the Harlix Divide, they freed a prison transport full of hybrid children. One of them asked Inari, "Are you the Shadow Mother?" Inari knelt and smiled. "I'm just someone who stopped running." The child reached out. "Can we come with you?" Inari looked at Yalin. He nodded. That's how it began. By the end of the first cycle, 37 children followed them. Then more. Refugees. Runaways. Broken things the world had thrown away. Together, they built something new afloating. Ship in deep orbit, disguised as wreckage but alive with hope. They named it Hollow Star. But those who feared it whispered a different name, the Cradle. A place where lost ones were reborn. Jalen stood at its edge one day, watching the stars move slowly. He had once believed nothing in this galaxy could change. Then a mother knocked on his door in the middle of a cold night and offered warmth in return for shelter. He gave her a home. She gave him a reason to fight. Now, across a dozen systems, slavers vanished in the dark. Transports were intercepted. Camps destroyed. And always, somewhere in the shadows, was the tale of a woman with silver eyes and her silent child. And the human who stood beside them. They never asked for war, but they became its heart. They never asked for followers, but they became a legend, and the galaxy would never forget the moment when everything changed. The night she said, "If I warm your bed, will you let us stay?" And he said nothing. He just opened the door.